By any measure, Americans live in a world of abundance. Abundant freedom, abundant technology, abundant labor, and abundant means of production, transportation, and trade. And importantly, America also has abundant natural resources. We should be awash in prosperity, but we're not. California, likely the most generously endowed region in the world, is effectively bankrupt. At what time we were considered to be the absolute best state in America for doing business. Now we are ranked last, the worst state, and 5 new companies are leaving California every week. At the same time, a strong economic recovery for all of America is not in sight. And we have a tsunami of debt that, if not stopped, will destroy America's future. Because of this, there are fewer resources available to invest in human services, infrastructure, and the environment. These essential needs can only be met if we're growing and prosperous. And today, we're squandering our resources. Why is that? It's my opinion we're in this situation because most of the voices we hear have it wrong. The mainstream media has it wrong. Most of our leaders in government have it wrong. And many of our educators have it wrong too. They're wrong because they believe in a world of scarcity, not abundance. and they behave accordingly. Their words and actions are aimed at divvying up what we have as opposed to growing more of what we need. Fear and pessimism, protectionism, looking inward and not outward, and the inability to adapt. These are both the symptoms and the outcomes of viewing the world through the lens of scarcity. They can't see what's possible. They don't know how to create new value. They can only see scarcity, and that's what they get. I do not share that viewpoint. I believe that by looking through the lens of abundance and by aspiring to be the best, by continuously working smarter, by using positive incentives and supportive policies, and by tenaciously striving to meet and then exceed world standards, America can continue to be the world's innovation leader and continue to thrive. Innovation, the creation and delivery of new customer value in the marketplace, is a core function of companies, governments, and educational institutions. All three need to continuously innovate, creating new value for their customers. We've been in this situation before. Remember Deming and his quality movement during the industrial economy? Japan was devastating America by producing higher quality, lower cost products more efficiently. And we lost millions of jobs. We didn't recognize the importance of what was happening. We didn't respond and change the way we worked. Not in the boardroom, not on the factory floor, not across government. And we didn't change what we taught in our business schools until incredible damage had been done. We were arrogant, and we weren't paying attention. We were looking inward and not outward. We didn't adapt fast enough, and we paid for it. Well, we sure had a wake-up call recently. Nothing seems to be working. It's time to pay attention again. How do we do that? First, we must soberly and honestly face today's world and ask what the global innovation economy means for us. The innovation economy and the knowledge economies are long gone, and the challenges and opportunities of the global innovation economy are here to stay. They will only become more intense as all 7 billion people on the planet fully participate. And we must celebrate that fact. We are now getting more people out of poverty faster than at any time in history. But we need to understand a few things about the global innovation economy. First, the competition is intense and it's increasing rapidly. Second, technology is improving exponentially. Moore's law now applies to most fields because they are primarily driven by ideas and bits, not by atoms and muscle. Third, these two factors are making it very, very hard to keep up. Our world moves extremely fast, and it's unrelentingly demanding. And it is unforgiving if you don't move and innovate quickly enough. Witness what's happened recently to MySpace, Motorola, Sun, and HP. Global standards and expectations are going up. So the bar we must jump over to succeed is going up too, a lot. But the global innovation economy also unlocks enormous potential for growth and abundance. Rapid technological change and huge global markets open up endless new opportunities. Just think of medicine, energy, media, communications, and consumer products. They're all in rapid transition. Consider more specifically healthcare. We're transforming medicine from being based on anatomy, chemistry, and physiology to becoming an information technology. How many billion-dollar opportunities do you think that creates? 1? 10? Hundreds? It's hard to imagine how many. We do not lack for major opportunities for innovation. They're everywhere. If we do not develop them, it's our own fault. Continuous, high-value innovation is now the only path to prosperity, environmental sustainability, and security for America and much of the rest of the world. And we have to get much better at it. For example, big companies must take innovation much more seriously. As mentioned in the video, the lifetime of the top 500 US companies is now down to under 20 years, compared to 70 years, down to 20 years, from 70 years in 1900. It is likely that their lifetimes will continue to decline if we continue to do what we're doing. The world really is speeding up. SRI has worked with many of the most significant companies throughout the world, and we have had thousands of senior executives come to SRI to take our workshop on innovation, the 5 disciplines of innovation. While almost all executives say they have an innovation process in place, they really don't. Why? If professionals in an organization can't describe their company's innovation process, they have none. That's the test. They have none if they can't describe it. And that's our consistent finding around the world. Remarkably, they really have none. And that's crazy. And it's not endemic only to business. We see it in government, and we see it in our schools. These institutions aren't using what we in Silicon Valley already know, the keys to successful innovation. Passionate, committed, and empowered teams, superb teams, the best teams. Focus on important opportunities, not just ones that are interesting to us. Compelling solutions. A complete innovation ecosystem with supportive government policies. And the use of innovation fundamentals, taking both the ideas presented here plus additional concepts and processes that we know are critical for success and applying them rigorously. The further we get away from this model, the more inefficient and effective any aspect of society will be. And in the global innovation economy, that leads to failure fast. The challenge, of course, is daunting, but it's one we must undertake. So how do we start? One logical way is to consider those practices and institutions that affect us throughout our lives. Namely, education, talented people, and government. Let's take them in order, starting with education. Did you know that China has almost as many honors students as America has students? That's certainly a provocative thought, and our relative position only gets worse from there. Over the past 40 years, we've more than doubled educational spending in real dollars, yet the improvement in educational outcomes has been essentially zero. And it is unlikely that any of our current federal education initiatives will make the improvements we need. Why? Because we're not using the innovation fundamentals, and thus we're not creating significant additional value for our students. And it shows. Roughly 50% of entering males from disadvantaged minority groups fail to pass algebra and graduate. This means that these young men are unqualified to be an auto mechanic or to work in a factory. They can't read a graph. It gets worse. Did you know that in Detroit, fewer than 25% of the boys graduate from high school? And if you don't graduate from high school, you are 8 times more likely to end up in jail. If an enemy wiped out 75% of our graduates, we go to war with them. But we're doing it to ourselves. And that's crazy. Until we apply innovation fundamentals across all of education, we won't see any real progress. There are exceptions, bright spots in a sea of otherwise dismal failure. Here in Silicon Valley at the Girls Middle School in Mountain View, students learn the fundamentals of innovation and entrepreneurship. In the 7th grade, they work in small teams to create and run their own businesses. I had the pleasure of visiting them and learning firsthand how they learn. They write business plans, request startup capital from Silicon Valley venture capitalists, receive funding of, say, $100, manufacture inventory, and then sell their products to real-world customers. At the end, they liquidate their businesses, pay off their venture capitalists with interest, donate 30% to a charity of their choice, and then share the rest. They experience the challenges and joys of innovation and the importance of creativity and teamwork, communication, consensus building, and personal responsibility. As you would expect, these young girls are both impressive and inspiring. Imagine programs like that from kindergarten through college to graduate school. These programs would produce graduates with the skills and attitudes needed for the global innovation economy and for America to thrive. Compelling programs like this are now emerging all over America. There are other exciting ways to innovate. Schools that embrace approaches that scale across many students and schools, such as digital and online education, are showing marketed success. Consider the Khan Academy, one of our award winners last night. And SRI has also shown dramatic improvements in learning algebra across different demographic groups using a digital curriculum called Cornerstone Math. Or imagine eliminating the teachers' union's grip on our schools. You can be extremely pro-union, but really, isn't it time we put our kids first? There are plenty of solutions, but they all require that we regard the world through a lens of abundance. Abundant ideas, abundant resources, and an abundant willingness to try new approaches that have great potential. I believe the result in education would be an abundance of young, innovative minds full of the excitement about the endless opportunities in the global innovation economy. Speaking of which, why are we keeping so many of our talented, innovative minds out of our country? It's yet another example of scarcity thinking. Limit the number of people who can get in because jobs are in short supply. That's crazy. Remember, I pointed out that every net new job created in America comes from new companies, not existing ones. And who creates these companies? Here in Silicon Valley, more than 50% of our CEOs were born outside of America. Perhaps even more impressive, 40% of the founders of the Fortune 500 were either immigrants or the children of immigrants. In other words, without our immigrants, it is unlikely that America would be the world's most innovative nation. Our smart, opportunity-driven immigrants are essential for driving our economic engine. I see this all the time at SRI. We've had the pleasure of working with some of the world's brightest and most innovative people. But if their visas expire, they have to go home. And going back home these days is becoming quite attractive. Stanford President John Hennessy has said that 3 of 4 Stanford foreign students used to stay in the United States after graduation. Now, 3 out of 4 go home. Who can blame them? They stay home because increasingly there are exciting opportunities to start new companies. My colleague Deepam Mishra, who is forming a new company in Bangalore, said, quote, "It's now gold rush time in India," unquote. Our visa process is broken. It's not designed to keep America competitive. Just imagine, our cap on the number of visas means that if a young Albert Einstein tried to immigrate to America today, our policies might keep him out. Smart, passionate, entrepreneurial people are the world's only truly scarce resource. And apparently, we really don't want them. Half of our engineering graduate students are from another country. We should take Tom Friedman's advice and find a way to give all the best students a green card when they graduate. For example, if you come to America and get your PhD from one of our top 25 science and engineering programs, or maybe just get a PhD, you get a green card stapled to your diploma. Even better, we should be actively recruiting the best talent. Doesn't that make sense? Which, of course, brings me to government. But where to start? Perhaps it's the makeup of government itself. None of our legislatures is run by people who really understand how to innovate and make business work. After all, they're essentially all lawyers. In contrast, of the 9 members of China's Politburo, 1 is an economist, and the other 8 are engineers. They're wired to fixing problems and finding solutions, not to producing thousands of pages of legalese that no one can understand. Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not suggesting for a second that we emulate China's system. Rather, I'm suggesting that a broader mix of skills in Congress would be a very positive development, which is, by the way, another best practice here in Silicon Valley. For sure, 20 years from now, some of those terrific girls from the girls' middle school would provide a valuable perspective in Congress. Then there's the way government treats business with a one-size-fits-all approach. For example, Sarbanes-Oxley, designed to improve corporate responsibility, is a relatively minor nuisance for larger companies. But for startups, its more onerous sections makes entering the public financial market more expensive and provides yet little value to society. It's another barrier to cross for new public companies, and ultimately leading to fewer new jobs. It's the poster child for what not to do. Sarbanes-Oxley should not apply to companies with values less than 500 million. Fragile new companies must be treated differently from big established ones, but Washington can't tell them apart. There are, unfortunately, many examples like this. See what I mean about government being run by some of the wrong people? And then there's our tax structure. America's business tax rates are too high compared to other nations, up to 35%. To partially make up for these rates, there are endless complicated loopholes. So companies rarely pay that much. Loopholes corrupt the system, make it costly to implement, and make it harder for those of us who want to create new businesses and new jobs. GE's CEO is advising President Obama, which is a good thing. Yet, GE, last year with yearly revenue of $150 billion and over $10 billion in profit, paid no taxes last year. Wouldn't it be better if more of our best venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, who are creating our new jobs after all, were talking to the President and Congress every day? Consider Singapore, which grew at over 14% last year. It has a simple 17% flat tax and a 0 capital gains tax. They are rated as the most competitive country in Asia and the 3rd in the world. In 2008, America was rated as the world's most competitive country. But this year, we continued our decline, and we're now rated 5th. What we're doing makes no sense. It's crazy. We need to get back to being number 1. Government must make taxes and regulations globally competitive by closing the loopholes, reducing tax rates, and cutting unnecessary regulations. They must find ways to encourage the formation and growth of new companies, which means not treating them like big established ones. And of course, it must slash the debt. This is doable. There's plenty of precedent for it beyond Silicon Valley. Consider Israel. Israel is, in some ways, a socialist state, with few natural resources, enemies all around, and only 7.5 million people. However, it's one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world, ahead of almost all of the other countries in the world. And per capita, no one comes close to them. How did they get there? They initially created a family of government policy reforms and best practice initiatives, such as the Yazma Fund, a partnership with leading foreign venture capitalists that helped jumpstart their venture capital ecosystem. Israel is still way too bureaucratic, but 20 years later, 70% of Israel's GDP growth has come from its new technology companies. Or take Singapore. It's an island nation with zero natural resources, not even any water. Yet remarkably, in just 45 years, they've gone from being one of the poorest countries in the world to having a GDP per capita on a parity basis that's 20% more than America's GDP per capita. They have learned from others and adapted to the global innovation economy by inventing new policies and by using proven best practices. For example, they'll give a green card to any graduate of an IIT, the India Institute of Technology, which by some measures is 10 times harder to get into than Harvard. Or Canada. In 1993, their debt-to-GDP ratio was about where we are today. But Canada was reformed from the left, which significantly lowered spending, reduced regulations, cut business taxes, and reduced the size of government by 14%. And it worked. Just 4 years later, they were growing again. And in 1997, the government ran a surplus, and before there was any significant oil shale production. There are success stories across America, too. Take St. Petersburg, Florida. A few years ago, SRI was establishing a new research facility there. The first time I met the mayor, Rick Baker, he asked me if I would help him build the best city in America. Wow, that was a different request from a politician. Who wouldn't want to be part of that? There's magic in committing to being the best. And in today's world, is there really any alternative? However, at the time, St. Petersburg was far from the best. But Mayor Baker, a conservative Republican, helped transform a predominantly minority community, bring basic infrastructure and services to where there once were none. At the same time, he got the more prosperous part of town to take off too. When Rick Baker ran for re-election, he won 73% of the total votes and around 90% of the votes in the poorer, mostly African-American part of town. A conservative Republican. Why was he re-elected with such stunning numbers? He listened to his constituencies, created a plan, and implemented it. He put performance charts for all the city services on the web so everybody could see how they were doing. And he did much, much more. Mayor Baker used proven best practices to dramatically improve the quality of life in the city, as documented in his new book, Seamless Cities, which I strongly recommend. We have the knowledge about what to do. St. Petersburg underwent a renaissance while Rick Baker was mayor. And in 2009, he was voted America's Mayor of the Year. How do these countries and regions with such different backgrounds, fundamentally different political systems, and completely different demographics and natural resources achieve these results? Most of these positive results came from passionately committed individuals applying innovation fundamentals and proven best practices, including the right balance of top-down and bottom-up. And we're now seeing this across the globe. Let me explain. Let's face it, decisions that are made completely top-down are dumb. For example, I certainly agree that we need to reform America's healthcare system. But does anyone here really think that our recent healthcare regulations will actually reduce costs and improve healthcare? Will they allow healthcare innovations to occur at the speed of the market at the most exciting time in the history of medicine? Of course, all bottom-up is chaotic. Left to insurance companies, patients, and healthcare providers, we wouldn't address the broader health needs of society either. All bottom-up actions won't give us the healthcare system we need. Both top-down and bottom-up actions play important roles in supporting innovation. But the sweet spot for high-value innovation and adaptation to the global innovation economy is moving down, not up. The world is moving much too fast for all top-down, which is too disconnected from customers, technology, and competition. For government to create compelling solutions for society, it too must begin to employ such innovation fundamentals. The question is, how do we do it better across America in the face of increasing global competition? How does America capture its fair share of the abundance of opportunities in the global innovation economy? The innovation fundamentals we've seen work in Silicon Valley will work across America. Here in Silicon Valley, we build and motivate superb teams using talent from around the world. We address big, important market and customer opportunities. We create compelling solutions. We work together in a complete innovation ecosystems with great research universities, venture capitalists, legal services, and many supportive government policies. We take these and other innovation fundamentals seriously. In addition, we're fortunate here to have a culture that focuses on achievement, not politics. Imagine if healthcare reform had been tackled this way. Let me leave you with just a few tantalizing thoughts. Suppose we use better innovation practices in both business and government to improve America's growth and productivity by an additional 1% per year. In 10 years, GDP would increase by an additional $1.6 trillion per year. And then there would be an additional $250 billion of federal tax revenue. That would obviously help our debt problem. Suppose that 90% of our children learn algebra as opposed to 70% today. And 50% go on to learn calculus as opposed to less than 5% today. Two important prerequisites for higher education and for high technology jobs in the global innovation economy. Then, for example, manufacturers would have the employees they need with the required skills, which they often lack today. And if we get serious about what works and new innovations possible in education, I strongly believe we can do this. Suppose that our companies and government agencies, such as the Department of Defense, our national labs, our R&D funding agencies, such as NIH and NSF, were just 10% more efficient at innovation. It would liberate tens of billions of dollars each year to be spent more productively on creating new innovations to drive America forward. I actually bet we could be 100% more efficient across business, government, and academia by comprehensively using innovation fundamentals. After all, we made much bigger advances once we adapted Deming's ideas 40 years ago. We can no longer afford to waste our precious resources on programs that violate the fundamental principles of innovation and have no chance of success. I learned the hard way, like some of you, what it means personally and how much it costs to not understand the fundamentals of innovation. That's me when I worked at RCA Laboratories, then a treasured American research institution. I had the smartest colleagues, the best partners, and millions of dollars to spend, literally. And I spent it. I was good at that. But I had very little to show for it. Why? The standards for success were much, much higher than I ever imagined when working at RCA. I didn't know what we know today, which is how to create value through the use of fundamentals of innovation. But ever since I've learned these skills, almost everything I've wanted to achieve professionally has been a success, including helping create the United States standard for high-definition television. I'm the same person. I just learned a much more productive way of working to create new innovations. There is no reason why today's young people must learn everything about innovation the way I did, the hard way. An American can do it best, too, if the Silicon Valley innovation model becomes the benchmark for America. And if we commit to being the best, not just good, after all, we really have no choice. We demand the political will. We embrace major educational innovations. We actively recruit and retain the best and brightest entrepreneurial talent from around the world. We incentivize and nurture the formation of new companies for job growth by treating them differently from big companies. Use Silicon Valley innovation fundamentals in large companies and other organizations across America, including our universities and government. And finally, we must meet and then surpass the rising world standards of performance. These initiatives would eventually eliminate our current debt. In fact, it's the only way we're going to pay off the debt and be able to supply the social services that we have a moral obligation to provide. And that would just be the start. If we commit to understanding the global innovation economy, exceeding world competitiveness standards, embracing innovation best practices, and viewing the world through a lens of abundance. The final question is, will we? I believe we must, although it will be extremely hard. You, others in Silicon Valley, and hundreds of thousands more across America have already begun. I've shown you today just a few examples. Collectively, we must understand that the future prosperity of America is at stake and that we are falling behind world standards. We must inspire others and show them how we can once again be the world's most competitive, innovative country. Together, we can liberate the abundance available to us and to the rest of the world in the global innovation economy. I ask you to join me in making it happen. Thank you. I'll stay here.